recording this meeting so that we can post it later on. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Before we jump into today's agenda, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the tribal lands and waters in California. The Cali PA building and the hub of this work group is located in Sacramento. Sacramento was and still is a gathering place for many local tribes who have lived throughout the Central Valley and foothills for generations and were the original stewards of this land. These people include the Nisenan, Maidu, and Miwok peoples and the Putwin and Wintun nations who have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many generations. It's important for us to take this moment and recognize that our organization sits on the tribal lands of Indigenous peoples and that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In acknowledging and remembering these communities and here and in all the work we do, we hope to honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. And with that, I will pass the baton to Jay, who will take it over from here.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the stew. So next thing we'll do is a roll call. I'm going to go through these categories on the left, but if you're not in one of those specific categories, add your name and affiliation in the chat box. So, don't think we've got any peer review panel members today. Is that correct? Any peer review panel members? Terry Fleming said that he wasn't able to make it because he's triple booked. So next we'll go to Owiha. If you could just say hello, and so we know that your mic's working.
Good morning, Shannon Murphy, toxicologist, fish advisory team. And I'm flying solo today. That's it.
Okay. Great, thanks, Shannon. Moss Landing.
Autumn Vanema.
Gary Chikawa.
Great, Gary, I'm glad you can make it because I hope you can help describe how things went out in the field this season.
Sure.
Okay, Region 1.
Yeah, Rich Fadness, Region 1.
Great, Region 2.
Good morning, Carrie Austin. I don't know if I'm flying solo. Christina, Rebecca, are you here?
Sounds like you're solo.
Rebecca's in the CCCAB meeting. We have conflicting meetings today. This is Melissa Doherty, Region 3, by the way.
Okay. And are you solo from Region 3?
I sure am.
All right. Region 4. Region 5.
Good morning, Lauren Snetherman here.
Great. Region 6.
Oh, I think we may have a few more.
Oh, sorry.
5.
Jordan Hensley with Region 5.
And Leah Jones.
Great. Thanks. Region 6.
Hi, this is Kelly Huck.
Kelly, Region 7. Region 8.
This is Nam Nguyen.
Morning, Nam. Region 9.
Good morning, Chad Laughlin here.
Hi, Chad. Okay, State Board.
Tessa Fojit's here.
Jennifer Salisbury.
Nick Marsala.
Chad Beering.
Devin Burke.
And Allie will be joining us a little bit later. She's also double booked.
So a lot of meetings going on this morning. Okay, so nobody entered anything in the chat. So have we missed anybody?
This is Peter Vroom from the Water Quality Monitoring Council.
Yeah, actually, we should have that as a category. Thanks, Peter. Anybody else? I see Robert Mackey. Have you spoken
Hi,
up?
folks. This is Bob Mackey with OCPW. I'm just listening in because I have an interest in the subject matter.
Great. What was your organization again?
Orange County Environmental Resources Public Works.
Great. Okay. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's the roll call. Quick agenda review. So it's kind of another shortish meeting. We'll do the usual quick updates on things, and the big one of the big items, big milestones, is that we've finished the 2021 sampling. So we'll talk about that and how it went, and whether there are any lessons learned for future monitoring. Then Anna's going to give an update on the realignment work in Region 9. Then, if we need it, we'll take a little break. And then the plans for 2022 are solidifying pretty firmly. So we'll talk about that. And then now that 2022 is solidifying, we can think about the years beyond that more clearly. So we'll be talking about planning for 2022 and beyond, and then we'll wrap up. Any questions about the agenda? Anybody have any time constraints? Need to leave early? Okay. All right, so let's get into the quick updates. The first one is the 2019 Bass Lakes data report and the data. This is the next major reporting item. And Jennifer Salisbury at the State Board has been reviewing the data and is very close to having the metals data ready. And we're kind of taking it step by step. Once Jennifer's done with the metals data, I can start looking at the mercury and selenium and start to evaluate and interpret the data. And then after that, Jennifer will work on the organics and we'll get those. And then about 2 months after I get the full data set, I'll have a draft data report to share with the group, as I've done for the 2015 and 2017 Bass Lakes data sets. So, Jennifer, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, technically I only have one selenium file left for the 2019, and it's specifically for Region 4. And then the last metal file that I have is actually for the Oyster Region 9 project. And it has an entire suite, so that file is going to take a little bit longer than normal when I'm doing the mercury. The next step, I'm hopeful that I'm going to get done relatively quickly, is to finish the age data so that when you're looking at those fish, you can actually figure out how old they are. Yep. And then I'll move to the organics. So
Sounds
that's
good.
really my next step, is the age data.
Yeah.
Jay, this is Shannon. Can I have a quick question?
Yeah.
The oysters piqued my interest. You mentioned that you had recent oyster sampling. From which locations?
Hey, Shannon, this is Chad down in San Diego. Yep. That's a San Diego project we were doing in San Diego Bay.
Perfect.
So we have
thanks.
oysters from all over the bay.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Jennifer, too. So let's move on to the 2020 coast data. And Autumn, can you give us an update on where things are with that?
Yeah, sure. So all of the metals, the selenium and the mercury for the coast have been reported to swamp. The organics are kind of a weird story because the state contract changed labs partway through. And so much of the data was sent to Delta Environmental for their analysis. And I believe Jennifer has those. The rest of them, though, we've got a subcontract in place to have these analyses done, but there's a problem in getting them across the border into Canada. So there are 5 samples that have never been analyzed, and those are now all out of holding time. And then there are 4 additional samples that we identified that we had archive material that we might want to have reanalyzed for various reasons. Again, all of those are out of the EPA holding time. However, we've had quite a few discussions about how PCBs hold up in tissues over time, and with conversations with the WEHA, I believe we've decided that we do still want to send those for analysis, even though they're out of holding time. So I'm still waiting for the go-ahead to ship these samples, and they're packed up in a cooler and they're ready to go. But
do you want to speak also on the fact that we are going to be using a different method through the Canadian lab?
Yeah.
And personally, I'm super excited about it because I'm hopeful that it will deal with the matrix effects that happen a lot of times with tissue, where a lot of times we're getting underreporting of tissue contaminant because of matrix effects.
Yeah, the new method is really, really new, and it's an isotopic method. It doesn't even, I don't believe they run matrix spikes because in the method itself, it eliminates all of those issues. And it gets really low detection limits. So we're hoping for some really excellent data for OEHA to be able to use for their advisories and compare against their ATLs and FCGs.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
So Autumn, who will give the go ahead? Who are we waiting for?
I believe we're waiting for the laboratory itself. I think there's a permit that they need and they're working on.
Got it.
Yeah. So we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Do we have a ETA on the permit process?
No, I think it's up to the Canadian government. And so I also haven't, obviously, if I haven't sent last year's, I haven't sent any of this year's either.
All right.
This is Tessa. I will ask them just if they've got any updates, but it did sound like the government kind of changed their process for the permitting, and so it was an undefined, the process was not clearly defined because they were changing it. And it was a big surprise to the lab, and they're usually very on top of these things. So
yeah. Sometimes things happen out of our control.
Yes. Unlucky for us, but I'll ask for an update if they've heard anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Next slide. All right, so we always try to list the new consumption advisories that have come out, and I went back through emails and found these. Shannon, did I catch all of them? It's only for the last 2 months. We met 2 months ago.
Yeah, and then we had a new one yesterday, Little Rock Reservoir for LA County. That's an update. We added 2 new species for a total of 8. And then Black Butte and Indian Valley Reservoirs. So Black Butte was an update as well for 6 species. Indian Valley Reservoir was brand new. And then we did a major update on Folsom Lake and Lake Natoma. They were originally one advisory, and now they've been split into 2 separate advisories, 2 separate reports, 2 separate sets of supporting documents. Folsom has 6 species and Natoma has 8. So that was a big overhaul. And again, just to repeat what we had said in the August meeting, that we're doing our due diligence to go through that major 2009 report that had over 20 advisories that were being updated when we released the ATLs, and now we're going back and integrating the new data, adding additional species, updating advice as needed. So we're really making a big push to bring as many as we can to the fold and updating the oldies but goodies.
That's great. It's awesome to see these advisories coming out. Can you give us a preview of what's coming next?
Well, that process is ongoing, and we are just keeping our ears low to the ground for the potential to develop new ATLs for other emerging chemicals of concern. So we'll keep you posted when those are available.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. Does anybody have any updates on TMDLs? One thing that I heard at the Delta Tributary Mercury Council from, now I might get the name wrong, Rebecca Ferguson from the State Board. Do I have that right?
Rebecca Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was Ferguson or Fitzgerald. She mentioned that the State Board is starting to think again about the statewide mercury TMDL, although it may not be a TMDL going forward, but that item is sort of being taken off of the back burner. Does anybody have any more information on that?
I think that about sums it up, Jay.
Yes. It corresponds with what she explained to our region as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's that's obviously something of great interest to our statewide mercury monitoring. So it'd be good to, it's good that that'll be moving, and we want to stay apprised of that and whether there's anything we can do to help. Okay, next slide. The Monitoring Council. Nick, do you have anything to update the group on?
Not directly, no. We have a meeting next week, or 2 weeks, November 10th. That'll be the last meeting of 2021. And hopefully over the next into 2022, we can start having longer in-person meetings again, but we'll see how things should go with the pandemic. But the agenda should be coming out shortly, and I'll send it out to the LERIS list. But other than that, nothing directly to update, except maybe AB 1066 was signed by the governor a few weeks ago, which does name the council as a rather active role in helping develop several things regarding inland priority recreation sites, and defining what that is, which would hopefully maybe lead on to some follow-on legislation to develop a monitoring program for recreation at inland bathing sites, basically similar to, but more expansive than AB 411 for coastal beaches. So a big data gap that's been around for a long time that's hopefully going to get filled soon, and some frameworks been put in place. So we're hoping to, we're excited about that and excited to kind of get that off the ground. I guess one other update is we're exploring some justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work. We are trying to see if a work group is able to be developed. We've put up some web pages on the My Water Quality website for some resource purposes, and we'll be talking about that at the council meeting, as well as introducing new members. So I guess I do have a lot to say. We have some new members representing, again, some sectors that have been missing from the council, that being public health. So we have Mark Starr that's going to be, at least in an interim basis, the council member representing public health, and he works for CDPH, which will be a great asset for us. And I say interim because they technically need a secretary approval, which we'll do at our briefing, so it's more of a technicality, but he has accepted that role. Also, a new sector that's being represented is the academic community, so think universities. And Dr. Krista Kamer from CSU Coast has graciously accepted to fill that position on the council, with Winkin Witherspoon being her alternate. He was the executive director for the CSU WRPI Water Resources Policy Initiatives group, and both of those are groups under the dean's office that have links to all 26 CSU campuses, so that'll allow the work groups in the council to leverage that resource for monitoring and for hopefully to help the work groups like this one, where there's some overlapping research and monitoring being done. And then Shelley Walter stepped down from her position as the POTW representative, and that position is going to be filled by Dr. Lorian Sono, who is the executive director of BACWA. So it'll be the first time in a long time we've had a Northern California representative on representing that regulated community. Other than that, there'll probably be, the notice was sent out last week. There's some topics on microplastics and other things we'll talk about briefly at the meeting.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Yeah, it was a great update. Anybody have questions for Nick?
Just a minor correction that CSU Coast and WRPI are under the CSU system and not the UC system, although they have lots of partnerships with UC.
I think I said that, but maybe it didn't come through clear.
It sounded like you said USC, but
I think I was trying to say CSU, but either way.
We heard what you meant, though. Okay, so thanks again, Nick. Does anybody else from the group have updates that they want to share with the group? All right, so if not, then the next two bullet items we have slides on, so I'll turn it over to Anna.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so we've talked a lot about outreach materials for the past couple meetings. Minor update, the booklet and associated one-page flyer. So the booklet was sent out to field crews, and Autumn will give us an update on that later. And then we created one-pagers based on that booklet and have posted those on the website. The fact sheet is with our graphics team and close to completion. I was hoping we would be able to have it done and posted by today, but not quite. So hopefully that'll happen soon. And I'll send an email out to the email list when that's available. And just in case you just can't wait until then and you want to look at things now, the outreach materials are going to be posted in 2 locations: on the Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program webpage. Go to that page, there's a bit.ly link here at the top of the screen, and it's right near the top of the page. And then also on our Safety Eat Workgroup web pages, it'll be on the right-hand side in the toolbox. And so you can see the flyer is posted there in multiple languages, and the fact sheet will be added to those locations. Next up is the training series update. This idea came actually from the last due meeting, and an action item for us was to follow up with Sherry Norris from SIA to talk about that more, and we have a couple of times. So the training series target audience will be tribal partners to start, and we'll record the trainings as appropriate and post all materials and resources online, so folks that are not able to join the training can still access that information. And we're considering a number of courses for development. None of this is set in stone. We're still in really early stages of figuring out, logistics of what should be included in the course and who's going to teach it and things like that. But just to give kind of a bird's eye view of what we're thinking about, it's essentially, how we do the work that we do with the program and the STU. With an introduction to what the heck swamp is and what's the difference between the program and the STU and how do we work together and all of those things. Crash course on study design and preparing to go out into the field, sample collection, protocols, hot tips, things like that for when you're in the field. And then going through to the data QA/QC process and how to submit data into Swamp Seedin. And if you want to pull data from Seeded and do things with it, how you do that through analysis interpretation. And then we're also considering a coordination and partnership workshop. So that won't be recorded because watching workshop recordings is really boring and no one likes to do it. But it is a good time to connect with potential partners and kind of spend time thinking about how we could partner in the future. So those are what's being considered right now. It's a lot to develop, and so it won't be happening quickly, but we're working on it, and we'll continue providing updates at future meetings. And I think that's it for those. Does anyone have questions about the outreach materials or the training series at this point? Sweet. Back to you, Jay.
All right. Well, we're right on schedule. So the next item is a discussion about the 2021 sampling. And wait, stay on that first slide for a sec. So we'll give an update, but we gave this item a little more time so that we could have a discussion about what we need to do, if anything, to factor in apocalyptic events like we've been experiencing over the past couple of years. This year the drought continued and the fires were a factor. So we'll give an overview of that and then think about whether we need to do anything differently if we're factoring in these types of events, which are, indications are that they're going to continue to occur. And, now after the past 7 days, we're dealing with rapid rainfall, intense rainfall and flooding again. So it's a good time to pause and think about how we're doing things. So next slide. So I want to just commend Gary and the fishing team from Moss Landing for their incredible work, persistence, and professionalism out in the field. By and large, they were able to get fish from most of the vast majority of the lakes that we targeted, in spite of all the obstacles. Gary, Gary does a great job of providing the sampling updates that, I hope if you have any interest in how the sampling is going, it's really super helpful, and Gary keeps us posted as things progress out there with his table that I'm gonna show. The latest version of it is one of the slides, but it's great information on how things are going out there, so that we can, if he's not hitting targets or things aren't going right, then we know quickly and we can do something about it. But Gary also sent some photos over the course of the sampling season, and showing some of the low water levels that were an obstacle in some water bodies. So Indian Valley Reservoir was one that was very low, and you can see the boat ramp there, and the water way down below the boat ramp. This was a reservoir that we did not sample. Next slide. Lake Amador. Gary sent this photo. It was when he sampled, it was at 37% of normal, but this is a lake, in spite of the low levels, that was sampled. But you can see just how low the water level is relative to the homes and their stairways. Next slide. Stony Gorge Reservoir was another low one, and I think, if I'm remembering right, we were not able to sample this one. And there was a video, a YouTube video, talking about how low this reservoir was that Gary forwarded. Next slide. And then Pine Flat. This one's a little hard to see, but that pipe in the background kind of tells you how high the water usually goes. This one was at 19% of capacity, but they were able to sample. Next slide. So I guess before I go into this overall summary, well, one other thing I'll note, and then I'll ask Gary for kind of his overview of how it went over the summer. A couple of lakes could not be sampled because fires were blazing in the area. Trinity Lake and Antelope Lake were postponed due to fire, and we prioritize safety. So we didn't hesitate to when Gary reported back about the conditions there to say, don't worry about it, be safe, and we can sample them in 2023. So Gary, do you have any comments on how things went?
Yeah, a few. Before we go out to any of these lakes or reservoirs, I always call them ahead of time and, to notify them, ask permission, and find out what lake levels are. And so a couple of them, like the very first one, Shastina, I called them and they said, well, all of our ramps are high and dry, and below it is just mud, and you'll just sink in it. So immediately I go, okay, well, that one's off the list. Some of them, though, they'll say, okay, it's below our ramps, but it's pretty hard packed. So sometimes I'll ask them, can you send me pictures? And they'll send me some pictures back, and I'll kind of make a judgment call and say, well, I think we can get in there. And luckily with our sampling boats and trailers, we have rollers on the trailers, and we can just, as long as we can get the rear axle down to the water's edge, we could actually launch the boat when it's kind of high and dry, as long as there's enough water to drop the boat into. And we had to do that a few times, and then we had to crank it up when it's completely high and dry also. But there were times that even after we did that, even with four-wheel drive, we were stuck, and we had to get pulled out by another four-wheel drive vehicle. So we had a lot of those challenges. And then as you saw in some of the pictures, a lot of the habitat that is, traditionally there was no longer there because the water levels were so low. And that made it more difficult to get the fish also. And then later on, the fires came. And at one of the reservoirs, Union Valley Reservoir, we had a team out there, and they were sampling, and they were going back to one of our locations by the dam. And some of the sheriffs saw them and got on the bullhorn and said, what are you guys doing out there? We're evacuating this area. You guys need to get off the water. So we ran into those issues also. So it was very challenging this year. But we got 28 of the 33 lakes that were on the list. So I still think it's a pretty successful year.
Yeah, very much so. Something that I didn't go back and try to summarize was, some lakes, because of the low water levels, we sampled fewer locations. Like some of the, the largest lakes, we sampled 4 locations, then going down to 3, 2, or 1 for small lakes. And there was that was an impact that due to low lake levels, in some cases we sampled, fewer locations than we had planned. Do you happen to remember how many cases of that there were?
I would guess maybe 3 or 4 at most.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back and see which ones, but yeah, there were some, and it was real obvious that it's so much lower and there's so much less shoreline and habitat. It didn't make sense to do the number that was originally designated.
Right.
Jay, I would just like to point out too that even though we had to leave Union Valley, we did get one of the 2 locations that we were targeting. So at least we do have some data on that, and I'm not sure how you're going to use that to interpret, but we did get a full complement at the 1 location, which is good.
Yeah.
I thought just off the top of my head that it was 4 or 5 lakes that we sampled fewer locations than anticipated, but I do have notes on all of that, but I don't have it concise for today.
Right. Yeah, that's fine. That's so there were roughly 4 lakes where that happened. So I agree with what Gary said, that overall, we had a successful campaign and pretty much largely got what we wanted. So even in a really bad year like this, we took a hit, but we still got like 85% of the lakes that we wanted to get. So I want to go to the next slide. So one of the things that's impacted by this is, with our Bass Lake design, the idea is to go out and sample about 35 lakes that were randomly drawn from the overall pool, so that each time we go out, we get a representative average concentration. And so, one impact of these sampling obstacles when we do need to postpone lakes to later years is that it's not a totally random draw from that initial pool. I think this is a minor impact, because like even in this worst case year, we got the vast majority of the lakes, and if we got 28 out of 33 lakes, it's not that big of an impact that some of them were not included and are being pushed into another year. So that's one impact, but I don't think it's a big one. And overall, I would, if you go back to the last slide again, so what we've been doing when this happens is there are different reasons that there are other reasons that we aren't able to sample. In some cases, reservoirs get drained for maintenance or improvements, and then they get refilled, but the fish don't establish right away. So there are other reasons as well why we sometimes don't sample lakes. And what we do is we just push them out to the next round. And usually we're able to get them. So like for this year, to the next round of of lake sampling is 2023. As the notes say here, we'll be pushing these lakes, these 5 lakes that we couldn't sample to 2023 and try to get them then. And usually that works. Sometimes there are longer term issues with the lake, and even in the next round or the a round after that, we're still not able to get to them. But there's only a very small number, a few of those that have been kicked down the road multiple times. And at some point we just say, we're almost at the 10-year cycle, so we'll just wait till the 10-year, till panel 1 comes around again, and we'll sample it then. But there's a very small number that happens to. So as bad as this year was, my take is that I think that approach is okay. It's not, our system is not terribly broken, and the impact, statistical impact on getting those statewide means is not that huge. But I want to give Autumn a chance to give her perspective on, the implications of the inability to sample some of these reservoirs.
I would agree with what you just said, Jay. I think we've got a good plan for how to deal with things when something doesn't go right, and we're still trying to stick to our random draw as best we can. But as everybody who does any kind of field work or any kind of research knows, things don't go according to your best design. It's just not the way of things. So I'm hoping that I don't have the statistical background that you do, but I'm hoping it doesn't have an impact. And I think that we're dealing with it in a reasonable way.
All right. So I wanted to open it up to the group to see if anybody's got thoughts on this.
Carrie sensed you were going to do that and raised her hand. Go for it, Carrie.
Great, Carrie. Yep.
So I'm looking at this plot, and I wonder if in 2017 Almaden Reservoir and Lake Almaden were included.
I would have to go back and look at that.
I'm hoping that Autumn is like
yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Because I think that in the Bass Lake study, those are a couple of the lakes with the very highest mercury levels. So it could not only be, high flows in 2017, but it could also be just when the lakes happen to land. So I'm curious. I don't know, and I look forward to finding out.
All right. Yeah, I can look at that.
So I just looked, and neither were on our panel that year.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's a question about so if a lake is from, like, say a lake is from panel 3 this year, but we're not going to sample it, or panel 4 this year, but we're not going to sample it until 2023. Do you count it as the 4th panel or the 5th panel? And I think that's a kind of a judgment call, but maybe I'll look at it both ways and see what difference that makes. If it makes a difference, it might make a difference if we're talking about Almaden Lake with super high levels. I think it is important to look at the influence of things like that, because that's one of the extreme outliers in the whole data set. But I think I hypothesize that hydrology is going to be a big factor, and it'll be really interesting to see what 2019 and 2021 look like, and high flows could lead to higher mercury levels as lake levels rise and more organic matter gets submerged, and there's there could be more methylmercury production associated with the, that's kind of the classic reservoir effect. When you build a new reservoir, there's oxygen depletion and lots of methylmercury because of the organic matter getting broken down. So there could be a reservoir effect but due to our periods of drought and then high water. So that's something that it'll be really interesting to look at, and if it may influence how we decide to group a lake that was from panel 4 but is actually sampled at the same time as panel 5. If there's a strong hydrology driver over that time span, then I would want to throw it in with the panel 5 if there was a big hydrological difference. So hopefully that made sense. One other question kind of related to this, and related to fires, I've been wondering whether any of the regions would be interested in post-fire monitoring of any, like a more focused effort than just waiting for the 10-year return cycle. There's a lot of literature relating fire to mercury in fish. I haven't really reviewed that literature, but I've seen some articles, so I have the impression that there's been quite a bit of work done on that, or at least some work. Another thing that isn't really high on anybody's regulatory radar is dioxins, and there could be dioxin increases in lakes with watersheds that have been burned. OEHA doesn't have thresholds for dioxins, and the water boards generally also don't, to my knowledge. At least Region 2 doesn't. EPA tends to have some concern about dioxins, but that's another thing. It's another contaminant that could be of concern after fires. But I'm wondering if any of the regions have thought about doing follow-up monitoring in reservoirs with fire-impacted watersheds.
So before we get to the rest of the group, just to note that post-fire monitoring has been discussed in the context of the bioassessment monitoring program. And, fire is not going to go away in California. And so thinking about how to incorporate that into long-term planning has been discussion in the swamp unit. And so that definitely can be something that we continue having conversations around, not only in bioassessment, but also the bioaccumulation monitoring program. And then just to note that in the chat, Autumn, for those of you that can't see it, Autumn noted that Almaden Reservoir was sampled in 2019. And Sherry would be interested in if mercury changes in post-fire runoff, wetting and drying, dioxins would be interesting as well. I probably read that message wrong, but hopefully you got the gist. Sherry, feel free to jump in if you want to add more.
No, that was good. We're working in forest and fire in the North Coast, and anything that we do could be translated to other watersheds. So I would love to see some post-fire sampling. And the wetting and drying with mercury, all of you know that's a thing. So some of these reservoirs would be interested to see that too.
Thanks, Sherry. Alana, I see you had your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is Elena Mystico, Region 6, based out of the Tahoe office. And we are having discussions about adding quite a bit of bioassessment to several of our post-fire locations. So I think that's probably where we'll spend our funding versus fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren?
Hey everyone, Lauren Smitherman, Region 5. I know that Alicia in our Region 5 swamp team, she's been doing some post-fire monitoring, but we haven't added mercury to that. But I think that's an important thing in Region 5 since we have such a large area that is impacted by fire. So we don't have those conversations going on right now, but yeah, I'd definitely be interested in continuing those and potentially bringing that up with our management to see if that would be prioritized in, for our swamp funds.
Mm-hmm. Anna, could you go back to the last slide again? I just want to point out that and refresh everyone's memory that when we do these, these sets of lakes, we do always ask the regions if there are other lakes that you want to add to the list. In 2021, we could only add 2, Lafayette and Diamond Valley, but that would be a mechanism for if a region really wanted to do some follow-up monitoring after a fire. When 2023 comes around, you could tell us, and we could make that a priority to add to the list for that round of sampling.
I don't see any other hands or chat from our audience or attendees. Oh wait, right as I said that. Carrie noted for next quarter's agenda, should we include further discussion of post-fire monitoring? If so, map of fires and reservoir sampling dates would be helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. Be interesting to look at those layers together. Do folks like that idea? Anybody not like that idea? All right, and I'm sure Anna's already got that noted as an agenda item. She probably thought about that already. Already had it on the next agenda. Okay, any other thoughts before I think we're about to wrap up on this, but any other thoughts about adapting to the apocalyptic conditions that we're facing all the time now? All right.
I've noticed, this is Sherry, I've noticed in all the grants we're writing, and that includes sampling, to include almost 6 months of extra time for fires, etc.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, and actually, thanks for going forward, Anna. There is a little more to the update yet, so Autumn's going to talk about these bullets.
So we've finished sampling our last lake yesterday. I haven't seen those data at all yet. The dissection and analysis is going a little slower than normal this year because of COVID restrictions that we've had here and other reasons. As I told you guys, we are unable to send any organic samples at this point. We are still creating them and putting them in our freezer. So things are chugging along. I'm still hopeful about meeting the timeline that we've set out in the BOGQUAP, which, sidebar, we finished that. It's been routed for signature. We're waiting for one signature So I don't know, Tessa, if you could maybe lean on Babcock a little bit for that, that would be great. And then we can get that finalized and posted to the state board website. Anna mentioned the Angler booklet that she and a team prepared. It is a fantastic piece of work. We've only handed out a couple, but the response we've gotten from those have been pretty good. One person was really excited to look up the lakes that he frequently fishes at. Another one, I guess there was a little bit of a language barrier, but when he saw his own page, he was pretty excited about that. So it's really great to have that in multiple languages. And I think overall, it'll be a really good tool for the field crew to have. And I think that's all I've got.
Thanks, Autumn. So before we go on to the next item, I just want to make sure Gary, if he's not seeing the chat, I'm going to read Carrie's comment. 28 of 33 in a year with COVID, fires, and low water levels. Terrific. What a great team. So yeah, totally agree. Pass along our thanks, Gary.
I will. Thank you.
And yeah, and not to mention the fact that Billy has been out with a shoulder injury, so there's even yet another challenge.
Yep. Everyone pretty much stepped it up and yeah, made it successful.
Great job. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Yeah. Again, just reiterating everyone's comments in the chat and everything that has been said today. Like, great job to the field crews to do what you do every year, given all the challenges that you face every year, and especially with COVID, fires, floods, all of that. Yeah, so we've talked about the bioaccumulation monitoring program Realignment for quite some time, and just some key updates and a refresher if you haven't heard about this project before. We're allocating a portion of the program funds, so the funds that support all of the sampling and analysis that we just talked about, to taking a step back and working with tribal partners and community-based organizations that have interest in or impacted by pollution in fish or shellfish through subsistence or cultural or tribal purposes. And really, listening and seeing if our monitoring program is reflecting their needs. And so, because this is it can be a pretty intense process, we want to give intentional attention to each region. We're starting in the San Diego region. Our second meeting was held on September 1st. And the primary focus of that discussion was really documenting and discussing and prioritizing locations where or water bodies of importance to the advisory committee, species of importance, and pollutants of importance or concern. And we use that to develop a draft monitoring and analysis work plan that has been sent to the committee for review. And just some key components of that work plan. Here's a general map with the locations that were discussed during those conversations. The purple stars are locations that are currently in our list of panels. We shoot to sample them on our regular schedule. The orange stars are new locations that that committee members express as being of interest. And so you can see that most of the new locations are coastal, and noting that piers and jetties and locations where anglers can fish without a license were important to sample. And that included lower urban rivers, as well as areas that are important for environmental justice work. So this is just kind of a general splattering of locations. Again, the committee is reviewing the draft work plan, and we'll be discussing during our next meeting the priorities of those locations, as well as species. So basically the discussion was what we're doing in our regular sampling in terms of the types of species that are sampled are great and of importance to those groups. Just a little key here, noting that you know, above that thick blue line are general you know, groupings of species that are currently sampled regularly in the program. Anything that is bold indicates that the committee, one or more committee members, agreed that that's also important to the community that they represent. And anything that's underlined indicates that multiple committee members supported that species. So, you know, additional species that were discussed for sampling were arroyo chub, and also there was lots of talk about shellfish, right? So we don't really sample shellfish as a priority in our core sampling, but that doesn't mean people don't consume shellfish in their day-to-day lives. So that's something of importance. Mussels, oysters, lobster, you know, as Chad mentioned earlier, the Region 9 is already doing some sampling and analysis of those species. So we'll be working with the advisory committee and everyone else that's part of this work to think about how we can prioritize that sampling of those species and the logistics of how to make that work when we sample next year. We also discussed pollutants of interest. Again, everything that generally we sample on a regular basis is bolded, meaning they agree. Yes, those are important to these. Mercury, PCBs, and OC pesticides were also kind of elevated multiple times as being of interest. In addition to those pollutants, there was a lot of discussion about PFAS, algal cyanobacteria, microplastics, and E. coli, among other things. And so we'll be thinking about the extent to which we can sample those types of pollutants next year, but also, you know, the objective of this work plan is not only to think about what's feasible and realistic for sampling only in 2022, but thinking about long-term monitoring discussions for the whole program. So we'll be talking about that. Another thing that was discussed was, you know, how we can potentially work with, or the need for some guidance on the safety of eating fish and shellfish in other ways than just skin off fillets. And so that will probably be a longer term discussion in partnership with OEHA on how we can sample and analyze data to help inform consumers of fish and shellfish that consume fish differently than what is assumed in the OEHA fish consumption advisories. But that was expressed as something being very important to those communities and tribes that were represented during those meetings. And so that's something that we want to dedicate time and discussion to see how we can support that and partner with OEHA and others to figure that out over the long term. Next steps, the next meeting will be held November 17th. As I mentioned, the committee is currently reviewing the document. We've given them about a month to review the work plan. And the goal of that meeting will be to come to consensus on the next steps in terms of like what changes need to be made so that we can finalize the work plan by December 1st, which will help with submitting permits and thinking about logistics with Autumn and team for sampling in 2022. And if you're interested in these discussions or products like the sampling work plan, everything is will be posted online on the Realignment webpage, and there's a bit.ly link there. And there's, if you go to the STU webpage on the right-hand side in the toolbox, there's a link to the Realignment webpage. Are there any questions at this point?
I just wanted to say that we also gave this item a little more time because, as you can see, this realignment is starting to get real. So we're starting to get an idea of what realignment monitoring will look like in the first region in San Diego, and so you can think about what it could look like in the other regions, and how to make how the process works and how to make the most of the realignment work when it does come around to your region.
Tessa?
Hey, Anna. Thank you for that overview of like what folks in the work group found interesting, or that was really helpful. I guess, yeah, I just want to make sure that me and my staff are kept in the loop, like in terms of what analytes or parameters may be of interest and what we may want to move forward with, because yeah, like some of those we just may want to talk about and research a little, like if E. coli really is a helpful thing to look at, or and how we would do some of those other analyses, and kind of doing some research on what it would really tell us. So just want to be kept in the loop on that. Thanks.
Awesome. I've added an action item to send you the draft work plan so you can get an early look at that.
Thanks.
Great. And that, Jay, your comment reminds me, so just like looking ahead, we will be dedicating time in 2022 to outreach to specifically tribal governments and potential tribal partners for next year, but also conducting outreach to swamp coordinators, water boards folks that regularly attend this call, FHAB coordinators, basin plan coordinators, tribal coordinators, all of those folks, to get a sense of interest and readiness to participate in this process in future years. I'm sure Chad Laughlin can attest that it's a commitment and a chunk of your time to go through this process. And we want to be sure that everyone, not just the state board, but our regional partners, is ready to commit to that so that it can be a meaningful process. So heads up for that sort of outreach and invite to discuss and have conversation over the next couple months and into 2022. Cool. We are early, but I do think a break is a good idea. We all kind of sit at computers for a long time every day. So why don't we do a 10-minute break, and folks can return at 10:50. How does that sound? How does that feel for folks? See head nods.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. We'll see y'all in 10 minutes. those away from your computers, but you can hear this. We've got 2 more minutes. So do your last stretches, grab that cup of coffee or tea or water and head on back, and we'll get started in 2 minutes. All right, Jay. Did you do your cat stretch during the break?
I got up and ate a brownie.
Hey, that works. That's also self-care. All right. Let's just try a thing. If you're at your computer and you're able to do the reaction, maybe hit an applause or a thumbs up or a heart emoji. All right. Seeing some activity. Folks are back. Welcome.
I'm not seeing any stuff.
Oh.
Do I have to have the participant list showing? Yeah.
It shows up for me in, when you see people's initials.
Oh.
Anyway.
I missed it all.
It was there and it was great.
Right.
I'll have you know.
I'll watch the recording.
Yeah. Okay. You want to take us to item 5?
Yes, I do. Okay, so we also thought this would be a good time to check in on the long-term plan for the STU and the bioaccumulation monitoring. We've been talking about the plan for 2022 for a while, and the plan is solidifying. And with that getting solidified, then the next steps beyond that become clearer. So I'll show that. But since we have these quarterly meetings, we have the opportunity to talk about these things. So we thought it'd be good to spend a little time on this and see if the group has input on where things are heading, both for 2022 and beyond. Okay, so next slide. So this should look familiar to those of you who have been in the stew or the bog for a year or more. It's the table we've been using to lay out the long-term plan. And it's got the swamp elements laid out, but also includes some of the other notable statewide or notable monitoring efforts at sort of things that are notable at the state level, things like the Delta RMP, doing a lot of bass monitoring in the Delta, like the San Francisco Bay RMP, which monitors once every 5 years in San Francisco Bay, and the BITE program, which we coordinate with. So those things are shown with O's, and then the X's are parts of the swamp bioaccumulation monitoring program. And looking at, well, I'll kind of walk through this a little bit more. So the long-term Bass Lake monitoring is in this first row, where we're sampling every other year, about 35 lakes a year. And we'll completing the full cycle of that in 2023 with the fifth panel of lakes. Other things that are noteworthy, well, that's the main one. Well, I guess the other thing I want to note is the coast monitoring at the very bottom. We started that in 2018, and working with the budget that we have, we've had to spread that over multiple years. And we started in 2018, and we did that collaboration with the BITE program. And that was another very successful effort. Karen McLaughlin was the lead on for the BITE program, and was the lead author on the reports that came out of that. So that's all completed and was successful. We did a little bit of sampling in 2019, and then along with that was a lake monitoring year, but we did a little bit of coast monitoring, and then in 2020 we did some more. The important development with regard to that for 2022, for next year, is that it looks like we can finish off the coast within our available budget. So that's something that we weren't sure about, but it's looking like we can do that. So that's, the earlier version of this table had the coast monitoring even going into 2024, but it doesn't look like we need to do that. Then the other major piece we're looking at for 2022 is river and stream monitoring. And the last major statewide effort was in 2011 for rivers and streams. We did a statewide survey. And so we're trying to hit the major water body types on a 10-year cycle. And so 2022 would be good from that perspective. But then also, even more importantly, is that Region 5 has identified some additional river sampling in the Central Valley as a priority, and very importantly has brought some of their regional funding to the table, which will actually cover pretty much all of that effort. So for 2022, they're kicking in $40,000. They've identified 5 sites that they want to sample, and this will get us started on the next round of river and stream sampling. But again, mainly funded by the regional, by Region 5. So that's a firm piece for 2022 and the coast. So those are when we talk about things solidifying, that's what we're talking about. We're in the process of laying out the specifications for the sampling and getting the sampling permits that are needed. And then 2023, looking to the next year, the big focus there will be, this will be the last panel of Bass Lake monitoring, and we're planning on completing that program, that 10-year cycle of covering these 190 lakes split into 5 groups. And then we'll be at kind of a point to decide what to do after that. We've been doing is, fitting in as much monitoring as we can with this Bass Lake monitoring within the budget. And when we go out, we've been looking at whether we can add lakes, and we've been doing that as much as possible. We've been filling information gaps identified by OEHA as much as possible. And we've been able to make it work over the last few years, but we can't really afford, it's really beyond the available budget that we have to work with. So we need to reassess after we're done with this 5th panel. We want to finish this 5th panel in the same manner that we've done the previous 4, but then pause and figure out what we can really afford going forward and what the priorities are going forward. So these X's are in bold because they're firm plans, and then the ones in the future are not bold because they're tentative. Gary, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, for next year, we are aware that we're also doing the EPA lakes assessment, and included in that will be about 32 fish collections or locations where we'll be collecting fish.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I don't have that included on here, but it's, I know it's certainly big on your radar.
Yeah, that'll be a big effort because we'll be assessing about 48 lakes and collecting fish at about 32 of them.
Yeah, and then one of the noteworthy things there is that I believe they're planning to look at PFAS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be something we haven't done, we haven't prioritized it. It hasn't been, it's another significant expense. But it'll be interesting it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. I'm not necessarily expecting high levels at the, at the sort of random lakes that EPA picks, but it'll be interesting to see.
And then I just wanted, there's been a little chat conversation. And so I wanted to elevate that. And Sherry, if you wanted to say anything about your interests, just to see if we can get some partners that are on the call.
Yeah, we had a grant that came from State Water Resources Control Board through the Rose Foundation to sample Clear Lake and 2 miles radius from Clear Lake. Cache Creek was high on the list for tribes that are trying to look for places to fish outside of Clear Lake, knowing the mercury toxicity there. And Cache Creek and Tribs were on our list. And then, of course, as we've been talking about earlier, we had issues with forest fire and drought. And then we had a water release day that was unplanned, so we had to postpone. So we have to go back in now and talk to Yolo County and get all that set up. But one of my main people that was helping with that is no longer with us. So I'm just kind of looking, I don't know if Gary, if you have any contacts over at Yolo County for Cache Creek, or if you have any experience with that watershed, just looking for some, we can do it offline today, but I'm looking for some resources for how to get restarted. We were relying on the tribe, but it turns out that the samples that they had are very old. So I would say that they're too old for us to look at those data. They're like over 10 years old. So.
See, we previous.
Go ahead, Gary.
We previously sampled Clear Lake and years and years ago, Cache Creek. I don't know if you have that data, but we have done that before. Yeah,
we were supposed to update it, so we're looking for something to update that years and years ago. And in part, it's location. I mean, we know fish travel around Clear Lake, but I'd like to know where the samples were taken those years and years ago, and maybe we can duplicate that and do some comparative.
At Clear Lake, as I recall, I believe we did it at 3 locations, and we probably have that information in one of our cruise reports. And those cruise reports are on the Water Board website. But if we need to know quite a bit ahead of time where we may potentially be sampling due to our request for permits. So anything that we're going to be asked to sample, we need to have a real big lead time.
Right. That's what we're not asking for you to sample so much that we would want to know where you sampled before. Last time when we went out to Clear Lake, we went out with Fish and Game that already happened to be going out for sampling, and that was fine. But now we need to get into Cache Creek, and like I said, we had it all set up, and then there was a flow release day, and we didn't account for that, so we had to postpone, and then we had a year-long delay from everything else. So we're trying to get back in, but what we don't have is locations set up for Clear Lake that tie into things that have already been done. So would you have like that cruise report for the stream on that website?
I don't know if anything was formally written up about Cache Creek. That was quite a while ago. Mark Stevenson was heading that up.
Okay, that helps.
And I see Autumn's hand is raised. Do you have any? I sense that you have something to add here.
I do, thanks, Anna. A couple of things. One, Sherry, I would recommend that you get in contact with the regional board, which I think is Region 5. So Lauren, if you could help her, that would be good. And then Jay, was Cache Creek part of the FMP program all those eons ago? We did a lot of work in that area, and I don't remember if that was part of that. I know that Chris Foe did a lot of work, and he did clams back in the day, as well as some mostly water and sediment stuff. But I don't believe we did any fish there for Chris directly.
We may have. I remember putting one of our boats into the area, but that had to be 20, 25 years ago.
Well, that's why I was thinking it might have been the FMP project that Jay headed up.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I think it was separate from that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recall that, but I can go back and check to make sure.
Okay. I know that Cache Creek wasn't part of the 2012 Rivers and Streams effort, so it was prior to then. And unfortunately, my institutional memory is not as good as it used to be.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. I remember we did Puda Creek. Daryl Slaughton has done a lot of work in Cache Creek over the years. I'm not, he focuses on small fish, but UC Davis might have some sport fish data from there.
Okay.
But I can follow up and see what I can find.
Anything you can find will be helpful. We're just restarting, so.
Yeah. And then as far as sampling on Clear Lake,
not worried about that. We're okay with that.
All right.
Yeah, we maxed that one out and hit everything we need to. We even worked with some of the tribes that were taking hitch and sampled a hitch. So,
all right.
Yeah, we just haven't gotten all of our data into seeding yet. So.
Well, just as a general note, if anybody ever wants to know exactly where sampling happened, you can find out when we sampled easily from the Safe to Eat portal. And then if you know when, then you can look at the cruise report for that year where Gary and the team provides great documentation of where they sampled and what they caught. Uh-oh.
I'm doing this on purpose. It's fine.
Okay.
Nobody panic. I'm gonna add the Safe to Eat portal link into the chat just so we have that.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so I'll keep kind of sketching out stay on that table for a sec. I'll keep sketching out the major elements of the plan going forward. So under lakes, there's a line of circles that kind of has an older origin. Back when the state was talking more about a statewide TMDL for mercury, there was some thought about monitoring to support that, and that perhaps the reservoirs would get together and either collectively or individually do some monitoring along with any actions they're taking to see how effective they are. So that's what those are. It's very tentative. And I guess, you know, it would still make sense if the goal is to take actions and to see if they work or not. But that's what that is. It's not something that Swamp would you know, not envisioning Swamp would do that monitoring, but I'll just leave it at that. And then for the Bass Lakes, the tentative plan would be to continue revisiting these lakes. I mean, the long-term plan was definitely to revisit these lakes on a 10-year cycle. I've got it as tentative because I think we need to rescope it at a minimum. So that's the tentative plan going forward, to continue with that every other year. Another major element is if we start the rivers and streams in 2022, we are at kind of the 10-year mark for redoing that, and we'll be getting started in 2022. It makes sense to think about 2024 like completing the rivers and streams survey in some fashion. That would be an off year from the Bass Lake work, and we could, you know, the scope of that would need to be figured out, but something that, you know, seems like a very good candidate for something to do in 2024. And then 2026 is kind of an open year. A possibility is doing some more lake work, you know, looking at beyond the Bass Lakes. We in the original statewide lake survey in 2007 and 8, we looked at a lot of trout lakes, and we had the general idea of looking at them on a 20-year cycle. And by 2026, we're about at that mark. So that's something to consider for 2026. And then 2028, we get to the 10-year mark on the coast again, and that's when the BITE program does their sampling. So this is a firmer plan that, you know, continuing that collaboration with the BITE program, and then doing the coast, you know, completing the coast survey again. So those are that's the sketch of what, you know, a straw man for looking beyond 2022, and a rationale for the different pieces. Okay, next slide.
Jay, real quick, is it appropriate to add the realignment work to that table now?
Yeah, well, the realignment is definitely part of the picture. This is the statewide. I've focused this on the statewide monitoring.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not, because the table's got a lot going on already, but it's definitely.
But I do think adding, you know, and we're going to talk about this more in the next couple slides, but having some sort of visualization of when realignment sampling might occur, and we'll know that more solidly, you know, after this iteration. This is the first time we're doing the realignment. We're learning, so it might be different in each region. So, but yeah, we can definitely create something that has that incorporated for plan.
Yeah, those kind of details just help us as the collection lab plan a little bit in the future. So we really use this table to look down the road and see, okay, you know, we're going to need this next year, so this winter, let's get it going. And I guess by the time the winter rolls around, we'll already know. So it's not, I guess I don't need it, you know, 5 years in advance, but it does help us do some planning.
Yeah, we definitely, the realignment's a major thing on the radar. It also doesn't fit this format very well, because realignment covers, like, just for San Diego, we're looking at all 3 of these water body types. So it doesn't quite fit to this format. Okay, so to kind of recap, in a more readable form. So for 2022, we're planning on completing the current coastal survey, finishing the sampling in the Central Coast and North Coast. We're initiating the second river and stream survey with the focus on those 5 sites from Region 5 for their TMDL development, and with funded by Region 5. And then we'll be doing the realignment sampling that Anna outlined earlier, or the plans developing. Okay, next slide. And then after 2022, to kind of repeat what I said earlier, 2023, we want to complete panel 5 for the Bass Lakes. We want to, like we've been doing, to include the OEHA add-ons to fill information gaps, and do this in the same way that we did panels 1 through 4. And then something that I've just newly thought through is the reporting schedule for these different pieces. And so there's 2 major sort of reporting, reaching the point where we need reports on 2 major pieces. One is the second round of the coast survey, which we're wrapping up in 2022, which means I'll have the data probably by the middle of 2023, if all goes well. And then I can write a draft report on that for this whole statewide effort by the end of 2023. And then that will be handy because we want to kind of do this reassessment in 2024. And then for 2024, I can finalize the report on the second coast survey. I can do another significant report on the full Bass Lake data set, so the full 5-panel data set. Again, assuming I have all the data, it's all contingent, obviously, on me having the data. But assuming I have all the data by the middle of 2024, I can get a draft report done by the end of 2024. And then we'll be, the realignment sampling, we're planning 2022. The current plan is 2023, that we're taking a year off of the realignment sampling, right, Anna? Like we're doing some planning work in 2022 to see, kind of determine which region comes next. And then we'll do the engagement work in 2023, and then have a plan for 2024 to continue the realignment sampling in another region. And then in this year, major event in the long-term planning will be to reassess all the monitoring, including, considering the budget that we've got available for the core statewide monitoring, the realignment effort and budgetary needs associated with that, EJ and equity and management priorities. I'm picturing a lot of this coming from the state board. Region, and then of course we always want to consider the regional board priorities and OEHA data needs to continue providing the information they need to update advisories. So there will be this major reassessment in 2024, and where we figure out the best use of the available monitoring dollars going forward. So as part of that is, I want to get the group, especially the regional board reps, to think about, what your needs might be the realignment will be coming to, all the regions over the course of time, but this example from Region 5 in 2022, where they really need some rivers data and are providing more than partial funding of it. We've done things like that in the past. We always want to try to help the regions, have the data they need to make decisions, across all the regions. So, but having that on the long-term radar helps us do that and fit that into the long-term plan. So I'll leave it there and see what thoughts people have on this. Anna, is there anything you want to add to what I said?
Just to note that we're trying to remain flexible with the realignment, and so like the goal would maybe to sample in 2024 or 25, but we haven't picked a region yet, so like we don't know. That's hopefully we'll have more solidified vision on that after next year, but yeah, everything that you said sounds great, and just noting that when I reach out to regional folks to talk about the realignment, we can also kind of brainstorm future sampling needs, management priorities that are coming, down the pipe and all of that stuff. So yeah, we can start having those discussions now and then, continue to revise as more things become clear. I don't see anything in the chat or any hands raised.
I don't either. So everybody must love it.
They're into it.
Okay, cool. I guess we can move on. Autumn, did you want to add anything about the long-term plan?
No, I think that we can work with what we've got already, and we'll stay tuned.
Great.
This is Sherry. We'd love to know where you're planning on sampling so we could confirm with tribes if there's any missing. But I know that you guys get full, but perhaps we could either support by giving money for the holes, ask the tribes if they want to do that, ask federal EPA if they wanted to help with that, or see if tribes have any plans to sample areas that might augment what you're doing.
Yeah, and yeah, we're happy to coordinate that way, and it's helpful for us also. I like the discussion earlier where Gary reminded the group that EPA is sampling, and reminded us that you've got a project. So we want to try to coordinate and make sure everything fits well together and is as cost effective as possible and not redundant. So it's good for both ways.
Let us know when it's ready.
Okay.
And just noting a question in the chat, when do we need to pick the next realignment region? The goal is to select the region after we've conducted the outreach with tribes and community organizations, and also the regional board, FHAB, SWAMP, tribal coordinators, all of those folks next year. So people are kind of asking, well, like, who do you have in mind? I have no specific region in mind at this point, and we're gonna kind of let the tribes and community groups heavily inform that decision. So stay tuned. Great. So let's see if we can wrap things up before 11:30 and get some time in our calendars back. So I think this time last year we talked about scheduling quarterly meetings for 2021. It seems that these conversations are really helpful for not just us, but also hopefully for you. And so we'd like to continue quarterly meetings. using the preferences and things like that that were elevated during that discussion ages ago. We're thinking the last Wednesday of the month, in January, April, July, and October, and just noting that this year the Q2 meeting was in May, Q3 was in August, but upon reflection, we were thinking some adjustment would be helpful in terms of giving space between meetings and things like that. So the question to the group at this point is, are there any like negative visceral reactions to those shifts? If not, then I think we'll also switch to having these meetings over Zoom instead of Microsoft Teams, just because I think more people are familiar with that at this point, and there's some facilitation benefits associated with that. And then Gary, did I see you raise your hand really quickly?
Is the scientific review panel, is that going to be part of the April 27th meeting?
January.
Oh, that's January?
I believe so. Wasn't that the plan?
That's the usual schedule, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's dependent on having something for them to really review, so.
Okay, because the sooner they give the blessing on 22's plan, then the sooner we can plan on getting out there.
Right.
Next year is going to just be a huge task for field work with all this. So the sooner we can get going, the better.
Yeah, so thanks for prompting me to think about that some more. So we do need to update the rivers plan to get that process started. So that would be something that it'd be good to get them to review. So we can target that for the 26th of January.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't think much needs to be updated for the coastal plan. We just did that last year. There might be some minor tweaks and things. Yeah, and then hopefully Anna will have a plan for the realignment by then that we can also talk about. And as Gary mentioned, we need to get started on permits.
Mm-hmm.
So, the coastal permit, I checked the other day, the remainder of the coastal work is already in our current permit. It might need a little bit of tweaking. We do need to do an amendment for the Region 5 rivers that we're going to do. And then we'll also have to do probably 2 different amendments for the realignment work, one for anadromous waters and one for non-anadromous waters.
So,
yeah. And just so Anna knows, we can have the reviewer, the advisors look at the realignment plan, but there won't really be any room to really change things in January. So
yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah. So I'm not sensing or hearing any objections to these meeting dates. So an action item for me will be to send out the meeting invitations after this meeting. So keep a lookout for those showing up on your calendar. Action items that I noted during the quick updates: to add the council, the Water Quality Monitoring Council, to the roll call list. Tessa will follow up with Babcock regarding shipping status and getting an update there. I think also for signatures, that was mentioned during another agenda item. And then just these are the last 2 bullets are older. If you see BOG referenced on any web pages, let me know and we'll update that. And then also a reminder, if you come across any literature, publications, white papers that you think would be helpful for this group, please also send that my way and we can get it posted on the relevant literature page. Were there any other quick update action items that folks heard that they want to elevate that I missed? Great. Item 3 for the sampling update, we talked about potentially Jay reviewing the long-term results when we get to that analysis in the context of wet and dry years. And I will add a note. You're right, Jay. I am already thinking about the next agenda, a discussion on post-fire monitoring to the next agenda. And a part of that, I'll also try and have some sort of visual aids for us to look at in terms of where fires have happened and where sampling has been and things like that. For the realignment, oh, Chad, yes, I see your hand.
Just real quick, for the post-fire monitoring stuff, I know, Jay, you mentioned there was some literature that you were going to be looking at. If Anna could add that to the page so the rest of us could see it, that would be awesome.
Sounds good.
Awesome, thanks, Chad.
Elena also just raised her hand.
Go for it. I think
Hey there, I just
saying that correctly?
it's Elena.
Okay.
But I just wanted to give you a heads up. We already have a little headway on some mapping in our region.
Oh, great.
So reach out when the time comes.
Do. Thanks. Great. So item 4 for the realignment, I mentioned that I'll be reaching out to regional folks to kind of get a sense of interest and readiness to participate in the realignment in future years. Again, that does not mean you're committing to be the region for the next cycle, nothing like that, just having an informal discussion. I'll continue to provide updates at future work group meetings, and then I'll send Tessa the sampling and analysis work plan. And the first bullet, you know, beyond just the regional staff, if you are a member of a community organization or a tribe that would be interested in participating in this process down the road, please also reach out to me. We'd love to connect and figure out what makes sense for you. And then Chad, is that a residual hand raise or a new one?
I don't have my hand raised on my end.
Oh, well, it's nice to hear your voice on my end. Were there any other action items for the realignment that, or the sampling update that I might have missed that we haven't already discussed? And then just noting in the chat, Ali mentioning a couple of other post-fire monitoring mapping efforts that are underway or complete, and we can share those when the time comes. And Ali, just to note that we also discussed, you know, post-fire monitoring discussions in the bioassessment context, so I can fill you in on that later.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, item 5. This happened after the break, so I wasn't able to update the slide. So the action items that I have are for G to follow up with Sherry to look at, you know, and provide insight on historical sampling locations. And I will send an email connecting Sherry with Region 5 Swampy folks, Lauren and others. And then I'll also work with Jay and Autumn to make an updated table that includes realignment stuff and future planning. You know, the table that we have been showing was developed the mid-2000s, so we need to update it anyway, right? So we'll work on that together as well. Was there anything else for item 5?
Nope.
Cool.
Anna, real quick, I would just like to add that I'll be working on setting up the budgets based on the work that we've talked about and making sure that everything fits in as best we can.
Awesome. Oh, and then I also see just an item for regional board folks to start thinking about what your future sampling needs might be for 2024, 2025 and beyond. So kind of start thinking about that. If conversations occur, make a note, let us know so we can factor that in. Okay, that's all I have on my end. Jay, you're good at catching items that I missed. Anything?
Do you have a list of agenda items for the next meeting?
Whalers. Yes, I do. I do.
So yeah, I think as far as I know, you caught the action items.
Okay, great. And then items for this are the usual. If you have speaker and topic recommendations, send them my way. We've already got post-fire monitoring in our brains. I will write up meeting notes and post them along with the presentation and the recording on our meetings page. The goal is to get that within, a week of the meeting. I'll do my best. And I'll also send calendar invitations for 2022 to the email list. Potential items for the next meeting, again, imagine post-fire monitoring on this in this table, but our usual quick updates, final sampling plan for 2022, a discussion of planning for 23 and beyond, the usual realignment update, and then we also are hoping to be able to dedicate a little bit more time to talk about that bioaccumulation training series. We're hoping to make some progress between now and January to have more solidified plans on what's to come. Is there anything else folks would like for us to think about or include in the next agenda that we haven't already talked about?
I'm just thinking through this rivers sampling plan, and it would be nice to have, so like I said a few minutes ago, it'd be nice to have a draft of that for the January meeting for the advisors to look at. And that's, there's what we want to do for 2022 is straightforward, but what we want to do beyond that is, like, we haven't really thought that through. And it kind of gets wrapped up with that reassessment that we want to do in 2024. So we need to make a decision on whether we do complete the rivers survey in 2024 and what that looks like, which is a tougher, takes more thought.
Yeah.
Bigger lift. So I don't think we can really have the rivers plan ready for the January meeting unless we figure that, the broader scope of it out before that.
Yeah.
Or we could have that discussion at the January meeting and then write up the plan and just have it reviewed by email. So I'm sorry for thinking out loud, but.
It's okay, that's what work groups are meant for thinking out loud and finding partnerships and opportunities to collaborate and things like that.
Anna, why don't you and Autumn and I'll discuss that and figure out if that's a viable item to figure out at the January meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And that's all, folks. So if there's no other last minute topics or items or anything that folks want to bring up now, I'll just wish you all a happy November and December, and we'll see you in January. And you know how to reach us via email before then if you need to. So thanks, y'all. Have a good day.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.